For historical context and more information, see the description below.
Everywhere and at all times, life would appear to be punctuated by the one word suddenly. How aware we were of it on Friday afternoon. America was going on about her business, about all kinds of business. Some of her people were at the club. Some of them were out to lunch. Some of them were in the office or on the highway, and some were just out for a noonday stroll. For the most part, there was nothing unusual in the day. In fact, America was beginning to think in terms of Thanksgiving and in preparation for Christmas. And then suddenly the news broke. The tragic, unbelievable news broke. The President of the United States had been shot. For a brief time, we hoped and we prayed that it wasn't fatal. The official silence left us with that hope, but it was fatal. The President was dead. And suddenly Friday, the 22nd of November, became a day of deepest mourning. Suddenly, too, a good many other things began to happen. Suddenly one forgot his politics, whether he was a Republican or a Democrat, this didn't matter. Our president had been assassinated. It didn't matter what was the color of one's skin or what his religion was. Our president had been assassinated, and we were united in a common bond of sorrow. And suddenly he wasn't just the president. Suddenly it came home to us that although we were mourning a leader, this man was also a father, a husband, and a son. And our prayers have been offered and will continue to be offered for them and for America. God of grace and God of glory, on thy people pour thy power. Grant thine ancient church's story bring her bud to glorious flowers. Grant us wisdom. Grant us courage for the facing of this hour. We need both of them, don't we? We need both of them for the control of the impulses that have been coming across America, because we have felt more than grief and we have felt more than just sympathy. At least to a degree, America has been aroused, and she ought to be aroused. There's no place in this nation for the assassin, whether the victim be the president or the poorest urchin in the slums. And one would hope that indignation about this would carry him to the point where he would be intent upon his heart with a great righteous indignation to bring about some other good things in the world that by his devotion and his dedication might be brought to pass. Remember, it was said by one of the great fathers of the country that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, the price of a good many things. In the memory of our late president, we can at least quicken our vigilance. There's no place in this nation for organized crime, or for any person or any groups of people that dare to take the law into their own hands. There's no place for the kind of society that spawns a major crime every 22 seconds and a murder every 40 minutes. There's no place in this nation for people who, because they disagree, go about dynamiting churches and homes simply because their thoughts are somewhat different on the matter. And of course, one of the disturbing things about it all, and one that brings a kind of guilt upon America, is the fact that surely we know that much of this could be obliterated if America really wanted to do away with it. We know that the atmosphere in which crime grows and in which the rackets grow and in which you can build up a hatred in the community, much of this could not exist if the citizens of a community said it's not going to be, and if a police force said it's not going to be. The great social realist Arthur Holt made the statement that 500 John Woolmans moving through the colonies would have solved the problem of slavery and obviated the Civil War. John Woolman, you see, was aroused. And when he was aroused, he moved among people until he got results. And there are so many areas in which we should be doing the same thing. Many years ago, in a city of England, there was great concern about the softness of the legs of the children. They didn't have firmness of bone. The bone was not well knit, and the explanation was finally found. It was fact that the water they drank was too soft. It was lacking the harder elements. It was lacking the lime that goes into the making of bone. Let a nation drink only of the water of verbal complaint, and it will soon find itself softening in character. But let it add the lime of action, and a new strength and a new consistency comes into it, and no greater memorial could be erected to any American who has given his life in public service than Americans begin to live as they ought to be living and tackling the problems as they ought to be tackling. Not as Republicans, not as Democrats, but doing it as Americans. The debt that we owe to every good American that has given his life in public service. It's a debt that we owe to every generation yet unborn. For instance, I read this from Sidney Harris a few weeks ago regarding integration. Think of it now, not in terms of what your political party is, but just the sheer common sense of it as it faces America. He said either the Negro is a full-fledged human being and a complete American citizen, or he is less than a human being and he is incapable of citizenship. If we believe the first, the Negro must be assured of his civil and his legal and his human rights. If we believe the second, the Negro should be stripped of citizenship and made a ward of the state. No middle course is possible. Most Americans, he said, on both sides of the issue, refuse to face this central point. The Negro should be treated just like everyone else, no better, no worse, or else he should be confined to a reservation, returned to Africa, or sent back to slavery. Any other solution is just hypocrisy. End of quote. Well, how many other solutions have we been trying to take to our problems in America that but are just hypocrisy. We are going through a period of mourning. We're in the midst of a grief-stricken people. This is a moment of truth. And America should be looking upon it as a moment of truth, realizing that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth. God of grace and God of glory, give us wisdom and give us courage to face up to that. But let us not stop with accusing ourselves. The truth about America has to do with more than her faults, and the late president would be one of the first to say so because he was a dedicated American. We're going to be criticized from the outside. It's bound to be pointed out that we have an undue number of assassinations of chiefs of state. And there may be references to nations of the old world who have been in existence a great deal longer than we have and have had no such thing for 400 or 500 years. It may be forgotten by some of them, of course, that we are a very young nation, that we have grown more quickly than any nation in the world has ever grown. We've been an aggressive people. We've been a volatile people. We've had to be such in order to achieve what we've achieved. We've had millions of people pouring into this country, decade after decade. But this is still a great nation. In the midst of our grief and with our heads bowed with whatever shame we may deserve, let us lift up those heads with that proclamation: we still believe this is a great nation. Pilgrim's Progress, recall that Christian had begun to sink, and he was afraid he wasn't going to be able to get out of it, and all of a sudden Hopeful said, "Be of good cheer, my brother, I have felt the bottom and it's good." Foundation of America, still good. And it's based on a gamble on man. It's based on a faith in man. I know it's a calculated risk. We know that it gives undue liberty to the fanatic, and it gives undue liberty to the lunatic, and it gives them opportunities to commit murder and to commit assassinations that they might not have if they were in a police state. But in spite of that, we still believe that the values outweigh the dangers, and we are still holding on to our dream. Dream the light of which now and then has flickered, but it has never, thank God, gone out. And it has always prodded us, and it has always haunted us, and it has always been pushing it on to become better people than we are. The American dream. We hold these truths, it says, to be self-evident. But all men are created equal. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Out of this has come our emphasis on the dignity of man. Out of this has come the thing that has allowed us to be so sincerely outraged by what has taken place. A dignity that spoke of man as an end in himself and not as a means to an end, and a dignity out of which has come naturally the growth of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Of course it has its risks. It gives great leeway to those who would disobey. But it's a great dream. And with all of its failings and with all the tragedies that have come through the years, let us hold our heads up in our grief and say, thank God it's still a system that produces men. What constitutes a state? Not high-raised battlement or labored mound, thick wall or moated gate, nor cities fair with spires and turrets crowned. No, men, high-minded men who their duties know and know their rights, and knowing dare maintain. Prevent the long-aimed blow and crush the tyrant while they rend the chain. Those words came from the pen of a Greek poet, but they're a part of the great dream of America. They're a part of the faith of our fathers. They're the part of the dream of our fathers, and they have brought us through many difficult times. As we look back over our history, time and time again, we can see where loyalty to that dream and belief in it has steadied us, and it has brought us through, and it always will bring us through, so long as we hold on to our dream and our fundamental faith that man in the large is good. And more importantly, a faith in God. It suddenly burst forth on Friday as the news of the president's death was shaking the nation. Men and women in all walks of life were praying. Radio broadcasters on television that had been accustomed for years to talk about nothing but that which pertained to the secular, suddenly were doing the work of the priest or a rabbi or a minister and calling the people of America to pray. And it didn't sound sacrilegious. It sounded as people who were dedicated to the great God above, when out of their hearts came the word, "Oh, God, no." When the nation was shaken, she was reaching for the unshakable. Said that if you were to bring one of the chemists of even 50 years ago into the laboratory where modern scientists are working on plastics, they wouldn't really know what was happening. If you were to bring an economist of another era into our present society, even an Adam Smith, he would be more confused than we are. But on the other hand, if you were to bring into a class of religion, moral, and ethics Moses, in whose eyes the meanest of slaves in the clay pits of Egypt were of more value than the dynasties of kings, or if you were to bring one of the prophets or Jesus Christ, they could listen for 5 minutes and then they could take over that class with distinction. Why? Because nothing new has happened in these areas? No. Because certain great truths were discovered by men in many parts of the world hundreds of years ago, which are still the basis of decent living. One of those truths is the faith in God. That God is not mocked, and blessed is the nation that trusts in him. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He's trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. There's a lot of that in the soul of America. It showed last Friday. So Isaiah says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. His king had been taken in death. He was grief-stricken. He was confused. He knew not what was going to happen to this people that he loved. And so in the midst of it, the young Isaiah sought the Lord. And because he sought with sincerity, he found. And as he found, he became penitent for all that he had done which was wrong. And he said, woe is me, for I am undone, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. And then in the sanctuary, he made his commitment. In the time of his grief, he drew nearer to his God. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. The hymn is number 412, 412. his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you peace.
We have presented a recording of yesterday morning's worship service from the Shadyside Presbyterian Church, Amberson Avenue, and Westminster Place in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Members of the church are the Reverend Dr. Howard C. Scharfe, the Reverend Dr. James H. Blackwood, the Reverend Richard M. Cromick. Organist and choir director was Russell G. Weichman. Today's sermon was by Dr. Scharfe. Again next Sunday at 11:06, be listening for another rebroadcast of the regular worship service from Shadyside Presbyterian Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.